Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the NHS Forth Valley, I'd like to take this opportunity to give you a very warm welcome to our annual review for 17/18. My name's Alec Lingston. I'm Chair of the Health Board, and I'm delighted to be here this morning, or this afternoon. So today's meeting is going to start off with a short presentation from our Chief Exec, Cathy Cowan, who will focus on the major achievements and challenges of the past year and highlight our plans for the future. As you're all aware, there's hardly a week goes by, but health is in the headlines. So after that, we're going to have a series of question and answers. I'm quite sure there'll be a lot of questions from yourself. So think what you would you'd like to ask us what reassurance you'd like, what detail you'd actually like. It is a major challenge now, delivering the health service. The developments in medical science is making new treatments, new medicines available. People living longer is increasing the workload, and in some specialities there's shortage of key skills, key consultants. So there's a whole mix of things that the Health Board have to manage. And then we've got the financing of it all, which is a major challenge. Despite it being prioritised by the government, there's never enough money. It's like the own personal budget. There's always more you would actually like to do, and it's no different in actual health. So, think about, what reassurance or questions you would like to ask. Now, before I pass over to our Chief Exec, Cathy, this is the 70th anniversary of our National Health Service. I think it's something that we're all proud of, and it's certainly something that we all depend and rely on, whether on a personal basis or a family basis. It is something that is really, really important to all our quality of life. So it's good to look back and look at some of the memorable achievements of the National Health Service over the last 70 years. So we'll show that video clip first. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look back over the years. I think it's fair to say the health service has changed quite a bit over that period, but the one constant over the whole 70 years is the commitment of health service staff to deliver a compassionate, caring service to the actual public and patients. So that's long may that continue. So without any further ado, I'll invite our Chief Executive, Cathy Cowan, to talk about our achievements, our challenges, and a look to the actual future. Cathy?
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and as Alex says, welcome to this review of the year ending 31st of March 2018. I joined NHS Forth Valley in January of this year, and it has been a real pleasure to work with some fabulous staff and some fabulous board members and partners and members of the public that I have recently met through the PPF and the likes. So in terms of my presentation, I'm going to start with a kind of overview of NHS Forth Valley, and then, as Alex says, talk about our achievements, some of the challenges, and a wee bit about looking to the future. So NHS Forth Valley is one of 14 geographical health boards, and we provide a range of healthcare services in partnership with our community planning partners. We actually serve a population of just over 305,000 people, and we employ just over 6,300 staff. We have a budget, a sizable budget of £570 million. And during 2018-19, 3,099 babies were delivered in Forth Valley. 48,911 people were admitted to hospital, 283,780 people attended as an outpatient, and 82,159 people accessed our emergency care and or our minor injury services. In primary care, the foundation of healthcare in the NHS, our GP provided care to just over 1.7 million people who made contact throughout the year and accessed our services. So today's agenda for me, I want to do a bit of looking back, and for me that's only to January of this year, so forgive me for that, and looking at the here and now in terms of our performance, and then thinking, as Alex said, about so what does the future look like for us. In terms of looking back, when I joined NHS Forth Valley in January of this year, like many other health boards, we were facing quite significant challenges, and a lot of that related to the flu and the population numbers with flu and the complications that presents, and obviously the weather. But despite these challenges, I think our staff, our communities, our partners, and indeed local businesses really stepped up. And we had people staying over in community hospitals on this site to actually make sure that we could continue to provide the services to patients and the treatment to patients that we so are committed to doing. I have to mention Serco, our partners in this site, because in actual fact we worked hand in glove with Serco to make sure that we kept the standards that we so aspire to and want to be proud of. So in terms of looking back in performance, I have to say I feel less proud. And I feel less proud standing here before you because behind waiting times are people and indeed our patients. And I believe that for a majority of those patients, they've waited too long to access our CAM services, our psychological therapy services, and for surgical procedures. I apologise for that. I believe we need to do better, and we will do better. I want to just share some examples of the things that the staff in this room have actually taken forward and the achievements that they're making. So, for example, there has been changes in the CAM services, that's child and adolescent mental health services, and the people that we support within these services. Our March position was 45.5%. So of all those people waiting, we were seeing half of those people waiting. I have to say, people in this room really stepped up, really thought about making changes to their service, and today our position is just over 80%. That's an example of what we can achieve when we actually put our minds to the things that matter to us and matter to our patients. I could talk about psychological therapies, and whilst there's about 10 services within that group of services, 5 of those services are absolutely achieving the performance that we want. And again, the people in this room are actually making the differences and the changes to actually pull that performance up. So I firmly believe that when we do focus, we can actually do great things together. In terms of our 4-hour access standard, that's our emergency department 4-hour wait, as staff call it in this room, our performance is not acceptable. It's well below the mark. And I think for staff in this room who actually provide those services, that feels heavy for us. But in meetings that I feel that I've actually engaged with throughout the year, I really feel that we're actually at a point where we can, like the CAM services, the child and adolescent mental health service, make a real step change here. And we can actually make a huge difference to those people presenting to emergency departments and minor injury departments in the Forth Valley area. For me, this is a key priority. This is an area that we need to see and will see change in terms of improvement going forward. In terms of waiting times, I think it would be fair to say that the Scottish Government have invested significantly, and our new Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport very recently announced significant investment in elective or planned or surgical procedures, be that in a day case or an inpatient basis. And we received a significant uplift. We believe that uplift will actually improve the waiting times for the people in Forth Valley. And the teams in this room are actually committed to making sure that we deliver improvements in both our day case and inpatient performance as we move into 2019. In terms of achievements, I've really just picked out a few. Actually, I had lots of things I could have shared with you. And as a new Chief Executive, I don't stand here before you taking the credit. The credit is actually down to the people, the staff in this room that you're sitting amongst today. But in terms of achievement, I've picked a few, as I say. These include the significant investment on the Stirling Health and Care Village. That's a project that involved Stirling Council and the Scottish Ambulance Service, and the work underway to mark the construction of the new Doon Health Centre. In terms of our people, our staff, our commitment to the public and employment within the area, we achieved 2 outstanding awards. The first was our Investors in People Award, where we gained a gold award, a gold rating. NHS Forth Valley is only one of 2 organisations to have achieved this. So this is something really quite significant. The second award, again, NHS Forth Valley achieved a gold rating for Investors in Young People Good Practice, and that was in recognition of the work to recruit and to develop young people. So really significant achievement. And finally, in regard to achievements, I wanted just to highlight a gold award for environmental excellence. This site that we're on today is the first hospital in the country to achieve this recognition. And in clinical services, we're equally very proud to actually be part of the Best Start recommendations. This is the Scottish Government's national maternity and neonatal strategy. And we have a picture of our Minister actually on site here and witnessing firsthand what that meant to a very young couple who had their baby on this site. And there was lots of laughs that day. So in terms of looking forward, I wanted just to finish, because although I've been nearly here a year, I think it's very important about, so what next for NHS Forth Valley, and with the support of the board and the support of staff and directors in the room. So in looking forward, I've kind of alluded to the 4-hour access standard. That's the standard that's related to an emergency department, and a personal commitment to actually improve that standard. As I say, the performance to date has not been acceptable, but what I would say is that that performance is part of an overall health and care performance. So when I say that, this is not about the emergency department not delivering. This is about how we collectively actually work hard to actually support our emergency department to deliver an improvement in that area. And we're doing that now, and I hope to see that improvement coming through. In terms of waiting times and investment, so we've got investment to actually improve our outpatient waits and our inpatient waits. And for those people who have followed the news, staff and the public, you'll have picked up that we have secured just under about £18 million. And that £18 million will actually be invested on this site. The investment will be in increasing the capacity in our existing theatres so that we actually use them slightly more, and that means we have to have more staff to do that. And we have 2 theatres that were built into this site so that if there was any expansion we could open them. They have not been open to date, and we will open them next year. But when you open theatres and create additional capacity in theatres, you need beds. And there's a commitment on this site to increase our bed footprint so that we can actually do the more operations, but we also have got facilities to actually care for people. So additional theatre capacity, additional beds. We also have additional diagnostic capability in this site, and that will be another MRI scanner. So a scanner to match the other scanner that's kind of opposite the corridor to increase diagnostic procedures and the likes. So for me, that's huge, and you'll see a bit of disruption in the site as we actually create that space, but it's really, really important that not only can we provide that additional capacity to support the people living in Forth Valley, but also to actually think about how we work with our boards, our neighbouring boards, to actually work hand in glove, to actually help them, but equally for them to help us, and we're doing that much more. Delayed discharges is an issue. It's an issue for us in terms of the impact that has on hospital services, and we're working very, very closely as part of our integration agenda to ensure that we find places, whether that's at home or in other settings, depending on people's needs, to actually care for people in ways that actually they have a quality of life. Integration, we have motored in integration. Health and social care integration is extremely important to us, and we want to work more and more in partnership to actually support people live in their own homes or indeed closer to home. And I don't have it up there in the slide, but I was just thoughtful about another area where we have been giving quite a significant attention to, and that's in relation to mental health services. And I did allude to our child and adolescent mental health services and our psychological therapy services, but we're also doing a lot of work in mental health services in general. And I'm sure people, if they ask questions, there'll be people in this room who'll be able to answer that in much more detail. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand back to the chairman.
Okay, it's now over to yourselves. It's very, as I said at the start, very challenging delivering health services. So we're more than happy to hear your views on the health service, both good, bad and indifferent, and any thoughts that you've actually got. So who'd like to kick off with a question?
I'd like to ask you about Quest 2020. You're aware of that, are you? Quest 2020.
I'd like to tell the audience a wee bit about that.
No, that's the government's giving you advice to follow. You don't know much about it?
No.
Ask Mrs. Cowan if she knows much about it.
Quest 2000.
Quest 2020.
So I'm assuming, sir, that you're alluding to the vision.
Yes.
2020. So in terms of the vision for 2020, the government is actually committed to, and we've committed to, delivering services to people living in their own homes, closer to home, making day surgery the norm as opposed to inpatient care. So all of these things, I think NHS Forth Valley, with the new chief executive coming in, is well placed to actually make those changes.
What about EFQM? EFQM.
In terms of quality management, sir?
Yeah.
Yes. So in terms of quality management, we have got a number of systems in place in NHS Forth Valley. Angela's here, and we've got an excellence in care quality management system. We've got financial quality management systems. So our commitment to actually quality systems and investment in staff training around improvement methodology has been quite significant, and it's something that I actually would embrace and encourage.
So you intend to get the EFQM accreditation?
Well, actually, my chairman actually spoke about this, because my chairman actually was a chief executive in West Lothian, and actually was one of the first councils to actually think about quality management. We haven't given any thought to actually be nationally accredited in that regard, but your question has actually provoked a thought in my mind that we maybe want to think about that, and obviously our accountability to the public is such that you'll hear if we do that, and I'm sure you'll come back to
Your management structure has no quality manager.
Well, we actually do, but I'll rather than talk and show.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, we have NHS Scotland has a quality improvement strategy, which is still the strategy that we're supporting. We have a local strategy, which is called Better Every Day, and that's our commitment to continuous quality improvement, as you've suggested. The Scottish Government is moving us to a total quality management system, and as Cathy's described, all of the country are looking at that. There's a couple of boards who have been thinking about that, and we are certainly one of the boards, certainly the work that Cathy was doing in Orkney before she came as well. So we've got almost all of the elements there, and the Government encouraging us to do that. Within our strategy in terms of quality improvement, what we have really focused on are things that matter to patients and public and families, which they've been telling us for years. So within that strategy, it's about keeping people safe. It's about particularly focusing on effective care, taking away the waste and making sure the consistency around standards, looking at person-centred care. And then we have an aim 5 in our strategy, which I think this supports your point, where that we as an organisation are determined to build the capacity and capability for us to have quality as everybody's job. And then within that, all of the executive teams, within our personal objectives, within our organisational objectives, and then all of the staff's individual objectives have quality improvement within that. So what we're trying to do is have a really ambitious strategy around QI, and then what we're trying to do is make sure that that's happening at every level. And Cathy's also given examples of, so there's big bits of quality that we need to do and move across the organisation. So every staff, every day, making sure that patients are being prevented from infections, everybody's washing their hands. And then there are other quality systems within our labs, within our radiology, so a whole range of things that we bring together. And it is quite a dynamic system. And within the board, within our agendas, within our governance, you'll see that quality improvement and the ability of us to also deal with defects, as well as the improvement side, is within there. So we might not have an accreditation, but we have multiple systems, and we pay attention to the systems.
Yep. Could I just add to that? First of all, your first question threw me. Do I know about Quest 2020? I've never heard that term before, so it must be unique to your circle. That's the 2020 vision, which is well embedded in everything that we actually do as a health board, so that we all know about it and it is well embedded. Just the terminology used, I thought, is this another initiative the government's brought out? I've no heard it, but the 2020 vision, everybody knows about it, it's well embedded. As Cassie said, I've been a great believer in quality. In my last job as Chief Executive Local Authority, we went down the road of EFQM, but I can assure you quality is built into everything we do as a board, and there's hundreds of examples we could give that are quality improved actual projects. We very much use evidence, whether that's stats, facts and figures, or speaking to patients or wherever, to get the good evidence, and we use that to design our services. So quality goes through our organisation.
What mentioned about health and social integration?
Well, I could speak for the next 3 or 4 hours on that bit. What particular bit would you like to?
Well, you give a description of how well you're progressing.
Well, it's still in its early days, and
2 years down the line.
yeah, but
Early days, isn't it?
well, yeah, it's a huge cultural change. Like all the services that were there before are still being delivered, and we're looking for opportunities to integrate these. And it's no easy integrating 2 different cultures when you're dealing with high volume, very personal services. But I think we are making reasonably good progress, and that progress will accelerate as we go forward. We're looking to establish integrated teams to deal with a lot of the day-to-day services that people depend on. So there is, it's seamless between the healthcare and the social care.
When you think it'll arrive? 2 years?
Well, it's a journey you'll never get to end, because the needs of the population will continue to change and develop and expand, and it will be something that we will continue to react to the needs and wishes of our population. So it will never come to an end.
Can I just give you an example to take credit for it, but I won't. I think the achievement around the healthcare village, Strand, is a fabulous example, because it actually shows the important things going into bringing staff together. And it's also a building, so people can actually see it. Sometimes when we talk about integration, it's a way of working, it's just how we do our business. And sometimes it's hard for people to actually get that kind of concept and think it's a difference to something. So I think that's a really good example of where partners, local council, and the Scottish Army Service come together to actually do something different. And I think something that will be really good. The other example is in terms of mental health and learning disabilities, where a number of patients and people were actually discharged from a community patient care and are actually supported in the community. Absolutely.
Sure.
Well, actually, yes, I am.
Not the ones I've seen then.
Well, maybe if you were able to speak to us at the end and share that with me, I certainly would be able to look into that. We actually had a patient story not that long ago on the board, where we actually heard about a lady who'd been in long-term care for many years, who now had a front door, and it was just a joy to listen to. So I think that there will always be situations where we could do better, but I think that story and the stories that I've heard since joining the NHS Valley have been really quite good.
There's an IGP member.
Hello, Teresa McNally. Thanks very much for the presentation. And sorry we were late. The bus was a little bit delayed. It's just something I picked up there, and I'm delighted to see Doon's getting a new health centre. Hooray! What about the folk in Carrinshaw and Clean? Because they've been waiting for a long time. Are they on anybody's list?
So I can say that we have very recently did a review of primary care services, and our capital programme, our investment in the estate, our buildings are such that we actually do functional studies and other studies to look at compatibility and just how a building works for us. So I'm not sure where it is on the list, because I could guess, because I can actually see it, but I wouldn't build up an expectation of, and that's next. But I can assure you that that's something that we pay attention to. And if you're really interested, we publish our property asset management strategy, which actually gives you a description of where our buildings are and whether they're a category A, B, C, or D. And that actually drives our decision making as a board to how we invest them forward. But it is areas that make sense.
Teresa, it's one of the very first things when Kathy was new to Forth Valley, and she was obviously spending time driving around. She passed the clinic in Green, and it was one of the things that, in terms of obviously the new chief executive, a million things to check out. When she passed the clinic, she immediately had come back to the board to ask, she obviously commissioned the work, but actually specifically around, because you can see that clinic space around.
Hello, my name's Callum Jackson. This is another primary care question. Currently in Clackmannanshire, there is it's not possible to get registered with a GP at the moment, and we're looking at the possible closure of Dollar Health Centre, as there's going to be a development right next to it, which is going to make it almost impossible for the health centre to continue functioning. I'm wondering what contingencies the health board have for this and for the demand generally in Clackmannanshire.
So I think it would be really to speak to me directly, because I can actually assure you, and I'm just looking at Stuart, who's our Associate Medical Director for Primary Care. So in terms of registration with GP, we have had some issues, and we have a meeting out in Clackmannanshire, probably just when I really started, where we gave a commitment to when practices were no longer independent practices, to think about what we call salary GPs, where we employ GPs. And I made it very clear that night and made it very public that primary care going forward will be a mixed model. It will be salary GPs and independent. And actually, don't look at that as being better or worse. Actually, it's a very good service. In relation to Dollar, I'll let you.
I suppose first of all, just maybe to hello, I'm Stuart Cullen. As Kathy said, I'm a GP and Associate Medical Director for Primary Care. And I suppose just sort of picking up on the issues around access to general practice. I mean, this is one of the priorities that is very much on our radar, and we are monitoring the sustainability of general practice on a daily basis. The situation that we find ourselves in Forth Valley is the same across Scotland. It is increasingly hard to recruit GPs, and we recognise that GPs are an ageing population, and many of my colleagues are retiring just now. And what we are doing is we are monitoring the practices we're monitoring all practices, recognising which practices are most vulnerable. We recognise that we have 12 or 13 practices that are more vulnerable. Across Scotland, there are 25% of practices that have got vacancies, and people are trying to recruit to these vacancies. But as Kathy says, we recognise that we can't replicate like with like. We have to move towards multi-professional working. That's in line with what we're doing with our board managed practices, but we're also offering support to our other practices that are in some difficulty just now. It also links in with the new GP contract and our 3-year primary care improvement plan, which is to recruit 230 whole-time professionals to support general practice, and that's a mix of advanced nurse practitioners, extended scope physiotherapists, mental health workers, and pharmacists. So there is quite a lot of work going on a regular basis around that. With regard to Dollar, we are working closely with the practice in Dollar. We recognise there have been issues with the premises. We're actually doing developments to improve the healthcare facilities at Dollar. We don't recognise that Dollar is going to close, and I'm in regular discussion with the practice, and that's not an issue of that the practice have raised.
Have you seen the proposed plans for the housing estate around the health centre?
Possibly I could intervene here.
Yes,
and say that there is currently a planning application for 600 new houses in Dollar to be built fairly speedily. And this is in line with government policy across the whole of Scotland. And I just wondered whether the Health Board had, a liaison organisation or strategy to deal with this kind of situation, because I know Dollar is currently at capacity, and the practice manageress and the senior partner have told us that this is serious for them, and that the Health Board needs to be involved with the local authority.
Yeah, I mean, I have sort of spoken to Fiona McGirr, who's the practice manager, and Paul Bond, who's the senior partner, on a regular basis around this. We recognise what's happening. We are looking at, there are a number of housing applications all across the area, in Stirling, Falkirk and Clackmannan, and including one in Dollar. We have made representation to the local authorities to highlight our concerns around the capacity of primary care. Immediately after this meeting, we've got another meeting to actually look at reviewing our strategy around all these issues, and there are a number of them. There's the big development at Jury's Hill as well, when we're sort of looking at Plean and Bannockburn as well, but Dollar's on the agenda for that too.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Dorothy Hayes, and sometimes a small thing can make a big difference. I took a friend who's 88 to minor injuries in Stirling. She had scraped her leg falling down the library steps going up into the van, and a very big skin flap, but 4.5, 5 inches both sides, and was really bleeding like mad. Went over there. Now, the problem was at the end, they wanted to get the district nurse to phone. She was told to phone the district nurse the next morning. Now, she tried quite a number of times, could not get through. And then when she got through, she was told, we don't have any appointments. Why don't you try and phone Bannockburn or some of the other places out now? Somebody 80, 89. Why did minor injuries at the end of the day, could they not just have a list? They're all in the same building, they're next door to each other. Even handwrite it and pop it through with your vulnerable elderly people and say, you phone them before everybody gets on the line in the morning. And that would have saved a lot of distress on her part, and maybe now she's having people come in, excellent care I may say, but that was really quite a problem, and I'm sure other people are having it. Now parking, I couldn't even get a parking space at 10 minutes to 9 at Stirling this morning for myself. It's just impossible. And when you're trying to deal with somebody like this, I try not to get an ambulance, waste their time, somebody more, and you're trying to get them over there. It is very, very difficult. When you leave, there's that pick up, drop off. You have to go and park and come back. It's got that curb. I saw a man before the car pulled in, and he had elbow crutches, having such a struggle with that distance. Now, if I had been able to get her closer the way it was, she could have leaned over and leaned onto the car and helped her in. I then said, wait there, and I turned the car around and pulled in the very first disabled parking, which has no curb. So you can get somebody right up to your door and help them in much more easily. And lastly, your striker wheelchairs. Very nice, they run very easily. But the thing that you rest the leg on, because she was bleeding like mad and I wanted to elevate it, I don't know what button. I tried buttons at the side, nobody else knew what button to fat. So maybe a little bit education, just small things, but what a big difference they make.
And meetings such as this are really, really good, because we get gems of feedback that we can actually change. So the points that you made about district nursing, car parking implement, certainly with purposes things like that, so actually take that away and think about how we can actually resolve that to make the difference.
It's the nicest benchmark to get.
Thank you for
Can I just say I'm really sorry about that experience, but thank you for sharing it. And the head of nursing in the community is here in the audience today, so we'll maybe just catch you at the end.
Excellent care she's having.
And I was really glad to hear that too. She said, and that was not an easy injury, but you picked there. I don't quite recognise that, but it's completely unacceptable. So, but I'm sure Leslie and I will capture you at the end. We would really like to learn from that. Thank you for.
Hello, I'm Rachel Nunn and I work for Stephen Kerr, the MP, and people come to us when they have issues, and I have to say we've probably had 20 cases in over 20 months, which is nothing compared to the stats that you showed us, so you must do amazing care. One thing that comes to our attention a lot though is the lack of evidence supplied by GPs for DWP medical assessments, and there seems to be a real issue. DWP and Atos Charter say that they tell the NHS how the evidence needs to be supplied, but it's either not supplied at all or it's supplied in a format that can't then be used. And I would just be grateful for your feedback to that.
So I've got GPs in the audience, and I'm wondering if Stuart picked that up for it.
I mean, I think James would probably sort of add into what I say. It would be interesting. I'm sure there is variability in the information that's coming forward in the standard of reports. It would be interesting if we could pick up on specific examples, because I think sometimes if we were to provide a report that doesn't provide the right information, I don't know if we necessarily get any feedback around that. So I suppose if that was to come from practice.
Yes. Thanks. So when somebody presents for an assessment report, there are 3 forms of evidence that are required. One is the self-completed questionnaire, which they may or may not complete with help. 2 is medical evidence from a GP NHS. And 3 is the assessment report on the day. I've seen cases where people will either overstate or understate their conditions, or present their conditions in a confused state, and that means that that one form of evidence can't be used or can be used against the person unintentionally, but in the decision-making process. If there is no GP, so if somebody says they can't, where they can walk, how far they can walk varies from day to day, but I know that it's under 10 meters and the report starts at 20 meters or 50 meters, then it doesn't say 20 meters or 50 meters, and so they discount that as evidence. If there is a GP report that says this woman is so sick she can't possibly work again, that doesn't provide the evidence that needs to be detailed, that says they have this condition and that means that they cannot do this function, or they can do this function but only at this level. That's the kind of level of detail that is needed now. One of the issues is when you have locum doctors or doctors who don't know their patients particularly well. They don't supply the level of evidence that is needed for the assessment decision. And so therefore the only assessment evidence that is provided is on the day, and with the greatest of respect to DWP and Charter and ATOS, that is not always at all compatible with what a GP then later writes for a mandatory reconsideration or an appeal. Those are very expensive processes, and we'd like to avoid them. They're very stressful for the people involved. But I think it's a government issue, and so because the NHS does a good job. So it's to find out what the government, we should be doing differently to help GPs provide that evidence, or is the process wrong? Would like to hear that.
Can I come in maybe at that point? I'm James King, I'm also a GP. The government are responsible for the benefits system, and they have chosen to make it work the way it does. It isn't terribly helpful sometimes for GPs to be filling the forms at all, because it asks a level of detail that most GPs actually don't know the detail of. The DWP are also meant to ask for reports. They rarely ask for reports. As part of our contract, we're obliged to fill those reports in. So we're then faced with a patient who's looking for that medical evidence, which they usually in Scotland don't have. In England, I have to say, they are more likely to have the evidence because they get copied into all hospital letters in England. In Scotland, that doesn't happen. And in fact, the front of the DWP form talks about medical evidence. It doesn't say medical evidence from GP. It's just medical evidence you happen to have. So again, it sets hairs running and isn't terribly helpful for the poor individual that's trying to play a system that is actually set up to make it as difficult as possible to get the benefits they're entitled to. On the other side, you've also got GPs that are incredibly pressured now with just the day-to-day medical work to do. And this is seen as a kind of additional occupational health role almost that, again, most GPs haven't been trained for. If they've got the information, a lot of us will try and help our patients as best we can. It is just sometimes we just don't have that information. The one other comment I would make is quite often if they go to CAB and get some advice on that, CAB are very helpful usually at giving that help or prompt to the GP to help them to fill the forms in. But it is a system that's broken, and it's a system that's been set up to be broken almost from the outside.
And it does cause, as James has highlighted, it does cause a fair amount of concern both between the doctor and the patient, but actually with the capacity and the workload. And I think we would welcome some discussion as to how this could be
That's
improved.
great. I only got the hold of this again to say I would welcome discussion of that as well. So,
could I also add that a lot of these welfare benefits have been devolved, and the government are looking to, Scottish Government are looking to develop a new system, and it may be worthwhile trying to plug into that when they are starting to design things from a Scottish point of view.
I'm Katie Baker. I'm from the Carers Centre in Falkirk, and I'm beginning to take up the post of being the carer support worker at the hospital here. The recent Carers Act that came into being has created new responsibilities on the health service with regard particularly to hospital discharges. Is there anything you could say about that and what's happening?
I'm not very close to the specific detail, but as an organisation and with our partners in both local authorities, it's something they would look at really closely. One of our colleagues in the planning team has had the link around this, and the whole of the organisation, including the hospital, has been working around that. So there is a dedicated stream of work around discharge and how we support discharge, and colleagues are looking at the detail of that. Quite challenging, some of the standards within it and the asks within it, so we're having to change quite a lot of systems. I have to say that in any of the feedback we get from patients and families, and indeed we were talking about it yesterday, it's those transitions of care, whether you're moving in, around hospital, into hospital, out of hospital, that cause people the greatest anxieties. And that's why this work is, I think, is happening across Scotland, and why we're really close to it. I have to say the experience of people around whether they have enough information as well as do they feel supported at discharge is one of the areas in our patient experience work that we're continuing to focus on. And we get a range, some things go really well, but we get a range of things that within that. So this is designed to try and help us be much more person-centred and much more specific around our systems. But we do have a dedicated stream of work around that, and I'd be happy to share the detail of that with you. But I think the organisation is behind it, and I think any of our patient experience work, our families, our patients, and those who care for loved ones have told us that that's where they feel the most vulnerable, and we need to get it right. The consequences of that is significant to people's well-being. So again, we've got it in our sights, but I'm happy to give details, but we do have a dedicated strand of work around it. That helps.
Sorry, my name's Sue Gilfillan. I'm just curious. I'm just reading your annual review self-assessment, and I noticed that the alcohol-related inpatient discharges is continuing to climb. And I'm just curious what your plans for the alcohol and drugs are for the next year.
Okay, so I should probably take that one. I'm the Director of Public Health. My name's Graham Foster. We do have a very active alcohol and drugs partnership in Forth Valley. We also have separate ADPs in the Falkirk area and the Stirling area, and alcohol continues to be Scotland's relationship with alcohol continues to be one of our most significant challenges, as I'm sure you're aware, and it is very much in our public health priorities. I was meeting with the ADP only this morning, and I've also met with the overall ADP partnership in the last fortnight, and again, that is very much one of the challenges that they're looking to address. What I would say is it's something we take very seriously. We in terms of performance, we do alcohol brief interventions, which is one of the evidence-based things you can actually do to try and help people change. When we come into contact with people as a healthcare system, often that's at a point where their alcohol has brought them to where they are, and that provides an optimal opportunity to actually say, what is your alcohol consumption, what is your alcohol behaviour, and have you thought about changing? And often that's the point at which people are most receptive, and it's actually a highly evidence-based way of getting people to change. So much of our focus is on trying to get those intervention conversations to take place. And I think if you look at our statistics in terms of the alcohol brief interventions that we deliver across Forth Valley, we're actually one of the highest performing areas in terms of regularly asking that question at the time and then providing support thereafter. And what's really important is this is something we all do together. So it's not that something an alcohol service does, it's something that we've got our whole workforce to do. So it's become routine practice. So it's routine practice in primary care, it's routine practice in A&E, it's routine practice in any of the services. But you're absolutely right to point out that alcohol continues to be a significant and challenging issue for us. It's part of the backdrop of having an ageing population with ever increasing healthcare needs. Because we ask those questions, we obviously then pick up more alcohol problems, so we register more of alcohol, and that's really, really important too. If we don't recognise there's a problem there, we're not going to fix it. But it's part of an overall strategy. And we really do just need to keep working as a nation on changing that attitude. That's from what we do locally, as I said, the alcohol brief interventions, right up to what we do at UK level. So in Scotland, we've got minimum unit pricing, for example, which will, over time, become a highly effective strategy, which will gradually reduce the alcohol consumption of the overall population. And again, that's really, really important. And then there are subtleties within that. So there's the sort of alcohol that people are consuming. So what Scotland has a significant problem with is we tend to drink very high strength spirits. And that's a significant challenging event. If we could get people to either drink spirits which are less concentrated or move from spirits into lower unit alcohols, beer is much less harmful than high-strength spirits, and again, that's about changing our relationship with alcohol, that we behave and the way we work with alcohol. So there's a whole range of different things going on at all sort of different levels, but it's very much on our radar as a public health challenge. But we are no different to any of the other boards in Scotland. I would say we're all in it together, and it's something we all need to address.
Is that the way people are drinking now is changing, and people are now using more drugs. And what we're finding is that more and more people are ending up being in A&E, being admitted. We're blocking beds, intensive care. There's a majority of people coming in there, and I'm just curious what we in Forth Valley are planning to do about this, because it's quite a significant issue when beds are at a premium.
Yeah, so it's part of an overall picture. So the mixed alcohol and drugs economy is also something that I would very much recognise. I think the background to that is actually more of a mental health issue. So people are struggling with anxiety, people are struggling with depression. People, frankly, have some quite miserable lives when they're living in deprived circumstances. And yes, they turn to alcohol, but increasingly they turn to both prescription medications. So we have a high number of patients on antidepressants and so on, and that's a challenging issue. But we also have a significant level of the taking of illegal drugs of various sorts, which are flooding into the country, frankly, from all sorts of different sources, and you can readily obtain a variety of different self-medications. So the question for me, though, is not can you get the drugs, it's why are you taking them, and it does come down to that significant issue around mental health. So again, we have a whole range of different promotion activities that we're trying to do. So our fundamental public health strategy, the board's actually published a health improvement strategy that's got 4 really clear priorities within it, which aim to address many of those fundamental problems that we're facing, which are leading people to have the difficult lives that result in substance misuse. So we've got an early years strand, which is all about trying to get in there at the very start so that people have a better quality of life. There's a significant strand which is about mental health, and so there's a whole range of things from mental health first aid programs to mindfulness programs that we're doing in schools, to well-being and respect programs that are addressing bullying and so on, which try to deliver people through their school years in a more healthy frame. We then have a significant strand which is around trying to address worthwhile work, because one of the most significant things that you can do to actually help people stay well and stay away from the perils of things like alcohol and drugs is to give them a worthwhile contribution. Now, that doesn't even have to be a paid job. That can be a caring role, or it can be a volunteering role, but we have to get to a society where everyone has a reason to get up in the morning and a worthwhile contribution. So we have that strand, and then we have the specific area that I was just talking about, which is the substance misuse area. So we do have a coordinated strategy of those 4 different areas of health improvement activity. Like everything else, I would like to be able to do a lot more. I have my proportion of the 600 million budget, which is frankly not very much, but it's what we can afford. And we continue to work very hard within that, and but I believe that we're having that really organised strategy of the 4 priorities, and working particularly. It's also about the partnership working. So I should say that we have representatives of community planning partnerships and so on in the room. So we do a huge amount of work in partnership with our local authority colleagues through community planning partnerships, and also through the integration and the integration joint boards. They're also doing that work. So it's a joined up strategy, but it's much more simple than just one problem. It's not an alcohol problem or a drugs problem or a mental health problem. It's about improving the quality of everybody's lives, which is what the fundamental of public health is all about. And if we can deliver that, we'll get to a situation where we don't all have to turn to a pill bottle or to a bottle of whiskey to make our lives better. And that's where we're trying to come from, and that's what I'm trying to drive as a Director of Public Health. So thank you for raising the issue, because it's really important, and it's good that we hear about it in the room.
Teresa McNally, it's just something that you referred to in your presentation, Kathy, and it was about the £18 million that have come extra from the Scottish Government. And you've identified 2 theatres that will be reopened, more beds needed, which means obviously building more buildings, yes, and this MRI scan. And the capacity within the staff we've already got, how is part of that money, will that invest in more staff being able to manage this extra workload?
Hi, thanks. Is this on? So the £18 million that Kathy referred to is actually split. About £8 million of that is for what's called capital developments. So that's for some of the core infrastructure, buildings, equipment type expenditure. And then we've got £10 million of what we call recurring revenue money. And that is the money that we will invest in new staffing, the ongoing drugs, dressings and consumables for the patient cohort that will be benefited by this development. So it's a significant investment for the board to have secured, because it will actually give us a much better position for our elective waiting times and to deliver our treatment time guarantees for patients. So in total, our workforce plan around this development is 130 staff, just under 130 additional staff. And within that, there are, I think it's 18 or 19 additional consultant posts, which are largely orthopedics and anaesthetists consultants. So, as I say, a significant development for us. We're still at the planning stage in terms of the recruitment for those staff, but we hope to have that additional ward and theatres open by November of next year. So that's the timescale for that.
Any other questions? No, we'd allowed an hour for questions. I think we've passed that hour quite quickly. As Cassie said, we really welcome your feedback. It shows that using the services, and sometimes we're involved in the high level stuff and we don't see the small stuff that make a huge difference. So really appreciate the feedback we get from yourselves. We've organised a buffet lunch just round the corner, and I'd quite like, if there are other issues you want to discuss in more detail, and I'd certainly like to speak to yourself about EFQM, I'm a big fan of that, then please do that. No matter how big or how small your point is, we'd like to actually hear it. If we don't know about it, then the chances of taking into account are negligible. So please, give us your actual thoughts and any points you want to firm up. So thanks very much for attending, and please join us for some buffet lunch. Thank you.